new one like at the beginning of the week. So there was a new one today, and it got me. Like I definitely.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'll send you the link.
Send me the link afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's like there's usually 5. Sometimes there's 10. It's 5, and so it's like the second one is like I'm like this is fake, and then the third one like I don't know if it was fake, but I had the.
Oh, really? I love that. I love that being slightly scared. You know, I'm not a massive horror film fan, Steve, but I like being I like sort of like zombie things because I like being slightly on edge.
Sure.
But, okay, that'll be perfect for me. That sounds great.
Yeah, I'm not like a slasher. I'm, like whatever, but like the creepy stuff. And this was like the third one's particularly good because there's like a dog. Like it's one of those things where you start to pay attention to the little things that maybe happen in them that make them sort of more creepy. And so one of them is like there's a dog barking at something, which is one of those things that you're like, you can't fool a dog. Like if it's somebody the dog knows, the dog's not going to like, it's like, so the dog sort of being uneasy makes it feel extra heightened, so.
Jeez. Okay. All right. Well, I got to, send me the link for that, mate, for sure.
I will. All right. I retweeted the tweet.
Okay. Oh.
If you want to I don't know. You already tweeted like a minute ago, so.
I did, but let's just,
Just bombing them.
So here we go. Retweets. We are live.
There you go.
Hashtag MNUFC. Hashtag MLS Cup playoffs, maybe?
Sure.
Why not?
It's as many hashtags as possible. I've learned one thing from looking at Instagram. It's you got to put as many hashtags as possible.
Hashtag, yes. Okay, all right. We're recording. Let's do this read then, shall we?
All right.
When injury takes you out of the game, it's time for your team to step up. At Allina Health Orthopedics, you'll get expert care backed by a whole health system of providers with convenient locations, virtual options, and an app that gives you 24/7 access to your records, test results, and care team. You're always close to the care you need. Schedule now at allinahealth.org/ortho.
Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when this finds you. Welcome to the Sound of the Loons podcast, presented by Allina Health Orthopedics. I'm Steve McPherson, and I'm joined by Callum Williams. We're into the Western Conference semifinals of the Audi 2020 MLS Cup playoffs this week, with Minnesota United heading to Kansas City to face SKC on Thursday, December 3rd, which is not Tuesday. Or sorry, did I say Thursday? Yes, correct. Okay, it's not Wednesday. That was what it was originally. Thursday, December 3rd at 7:30 p.m. And that game has been moved from FS1 to just Fox. There's no numbers. It's not sports. It's just Fox. It's like where you watch The Simpsons and stuff like that, which is pretty fun. Cal, I have a question for you. How do you feel about sparkling water?
I think it's gross.
You're not a sparkling water guy?
No. Just plain water for me, no problem. Are we talking flavored or just regular? Still.
Let's start from regular, non-flavored. So I'm not talking LaCroix. I'm just saying, like, if you're in a restaurant, like when you go to France or whatever, if you've been to France or they'll be like, do you want it? Do you want sparkling or still like Sangaz or Gaz? So like, what do you say? You're flat.
The sparkling water, grim, gross. It's like drinking water from the swamp. It's just not great. I don't like it at all.
It's bubbling with sulfur. It's not usually sulfur, but now, okay. But flavored, do you enjoy a flavored water?
I don't mind flavored. Yeah, the flavored's not too bad at all. But sparkling water in general makes me a bit. Well, it just confuses me really. I'm like, why is this sparkling? If it's sparkling, do we not classify it as a soda? Why is it just sparkling? Why can't water just be water? I don't know.
I mean, I feel you. I feel like the flavored sparkling waters are what I drink when I want a flavor to something, but I don't want to drink a soda or something like that. So it's a little better. It feels a little better for you than like even a Diet Coke or something like that. But I came around on certain kinds of sparkling water, like Topo Chico, which is I believe Mexican, is an excellent sparkling water, or Pellegrino. It can be kind of nice occasionally for if you want to get classy, I guess. But I grew up not. I didn't.
Does sparkling water define what class you are? Is that a thing?
It always seemed classy. Perrier, I don't know. It seemed classy growing up. So it's closer to champagne, isn't it? So
Dom Perrier, that's a champagne. I'll drink that all night, no problem. Yeah.
There you go. No, I thought that I grew up. I was like, I'm never going to drink sparkling water. I have soda and have water. Why would I make them come together. But now that I'm old, I guess maybe I'm just because I'm old. Sparkling, maybe it's coming up for you. I know you're 30 now, so eventually you'll hit that point where you just have to start drinking sparkling water and wearing high-waisted pants and white sneakers. So
no, that's being American, Steve.
that's Florida for you. All right, let's talk a little bit about the playoffs here. I wanted to talk about upsets because going back to our last episode, I believe we both confidently, said that after the play-in games, we favored Toronto and Philly against any comers, and now they're both out, including Portland also in the West. So those top 6 teams across both conferences, only 3 of them are still out there. And it's interesting to me because for a long time, at least ever since I started working in MLS in 2017, there's always this talk about parity in the league and how, there's not dynasties or there's not these sort of perennial champs in the same way. And yet we've seen, Toronto have tremendous success winning the treble. Maybe we'll touch on Greg Vanney stepping down as Toronto's coach, but, they won the treble in 2017, repeatedly getting to the finals. Seattle, another team that's always in the finals, sort of semi-dynasties, but the switch to single elimination games, which has happened, really does sort of make it like anything can happen. And I think my overall question, I'd be interested in your opinion overall on those first round games, but are we maybe is it possible we're in a kind of sweet spot actually between parity and dynasty in a way that I think we might be uncomfortable. It might be a little uncomfortable for people who are used to one or the other in their sports. Like if you look at the NCAA March Madness tournament, there's upsets galore, right? It's like any team can upset any other team, especially as college basketball overall has sort of raised the bar. The matchups between these different ranked teams are not as big of a disparity as you might think. But then you have the NBA where the Cavs and the Warriors met in the finals for 4 years in a row. And it was sort of like, well, these are the teams who are going to be at the end. It seems sort of like, yes, we have these semi-dynasties, these perennial front runners, these teams like, obviously it's been a weird season. So LAFC, not in that position now, but your LAFCs, your Atlanta United, they're obviously sort of, in the middle of restructuring and sort of refiguring out who they are. But Toronto, Seattle, these teams that are going to be there. But then at a moment's notice, they could get flipped by an upstart team like your Nashville's or something like that. So I think it's kind of fun right now.
Yeah, I think, look, Major League Soccer, Steve, is unique in that sense from a footballing standpoint, because I don't know any other league in the world that has the parity that it does. You could argue some of the new startups like the Indian Super League maybe, and maybe the Australian A-League has an element of parity about it as well. But for the most part, in most leagues, yes, it really is your regulars that are usually towards the upper echelons of the league, and the rest just sort of scrap by, and a good season is finishing mid-table, and that's just not the way it works in Major League Soccer. And again, it's why it's unique and why we love it. The fact that the 8th seed New England are in the conference final of the Eastern Conference just tells you that you can go into the postseason with a little bit of momentum, and if you've got an experienced head coach, which they do, anything's possible. And Nashville are a prime example. Coming into it on a decent run, not a great run, but a decent run, particularly when they were playing at home as well. And I think the thing about Nashville for me as well, Steve, is that they were able to quickly identify what they were. It took them a little while, when things were normal the first couple of games of the season, but once they had the time to establish what they were and knew the types of players that they wanted and the types of players that they needed to play the way that they wanted, then that's okay for them. But I would also argue it's not necessarily the way they want to play, it's the way that they are forced to play in an expansion season. And that's okay, that's fine. And it worked wonders for them. Signing players like Dax McCarty. Dax has done this a million times. As has, Gary Smith was the MLS Cup champion with Colorado Rapids. He was the head coach. He's done this before, But ultimately, Steve, as you're insinuating, these playoffs have been fun. And I don't ever remember a post-season Major League Soccer that wasn't fun. And that's where I kind of think this league is unique, because I have covered playoffs in the past, in England, for example, and it hasn't been as fun. It's been a little more reserved. And a lot of that, as you quite rightly say, it comes down to because now it's single elimination and you have to force the issue. At some stage, you have to. I think it's worked wonders for Major League Soccer, this single elimination process. It's been really good. So this is the thing as well. Trying to predict moving forward is nigh impossible because it just depends on who shows up during the day. Yes, you can break down your tactics. You can say such and such should be doing this. This is what they usually do against this kind of opponent. But ultimately, it just depends on what happens on the day. And that's why we love this league.
Yeah. I mean, you look, Cal, like, I think the one thing I was smart about is I said that, I picked the Revs for the play-in game, saying that I feel like Bruce Arena has that experience and that coaching experience is big. I mean, I feel like the Revs' success, is down to two things: Bruce Arena and that coaching experience and that adjustments in the playoffs and sort of understanding how to game plan for an opponent and execute that game plan is huge. And then Carlos Hill being healthy, which he was not most of the season. You roll into the playoffs with a guy like that, a game changer alongside Bo. They look good. And now suddenly they look like the team, they've sort of been lying. It feels like they've been lying in the weeds a little bit for most of the season, like floating down there. And then it's like, now they've got all their guys healthy heading into the postseason. And yeah, it seems impossible to predict out East.
Yeah. Also, what I will say is Holding Midfielder Appreciation Society at the Revs as well. The combination of Polster and Caldwell, I thought were good actually. Caldwell made the one mistake. He lost his mark for the Orlando goal, but there's a reason why these players are allowed to play the way they are, and it comes from the solidity and the foundation of the centre of midfield for the Revs. But Gustavo Bo is top class. Carlos Gil is somebody I'm familiar with, having seen him play in the Premier League with Aston Villa. And when he gets going, he's magical. Just a wonderful player. Buxa is almost best described as like a robust centre forward. He's somebody who, if I was to say to you, what's Adam Buxa's best trait, what's his best quality, you'd probably struggle to identify something, because he's one of these all-round centre forwards. Mm-hmm. He can play the target man. I'm not sure he could. I'm sure he could press. I don't know if he would be as effective as somebody with pace. But my point is that the Revs seem to have just about a bit of everything, really. The emergence of Tejon Buchanan as a right back as well has really helped, and has added an element that not a lot of people were prepared to deal with as well. So, look, for me, the Revs, I put it out the other day on social media. As I said, I had a conversation with a friend. This was after our podcast, and I said, you can't count out the Revs, because Bruce Arena's been here so many times. He knows what he's doing. And wouldn't it be so 2020 if, as I said earlier on, the 8th seed New England Revolution, who usually wouldn't qualify, 8th seed doesn't usually get you qualification for the postseason. Right. Wouldn't it be so 2020 if they went on and won the cup?
Yeah. Well, what Boston doesn't need is another team winning a championship at this point. They've just the Pats and the Celtics. It's just it's too much. They're already insufferable. So let's not give them that. Let's talk a little bit, Cal, about just the news that broke this morning. Greg Vanney stepping down as Toronto FC's head coach. I don't know if you've heard anything about this. I mean, is this just one of those moments where it's like you did so much for this team, but it went badly, and now it's time to just move on to something else? I mean, they phrased it as stepping down, which makes it sound sort of like it was a little mutual or something, but one never knows with these kind of things.
Well, there's an abundance of question marks around this, really, isn't there, Steve? Because we knew this was a contract year for Greg Vanney, but nobody really thought that the relationship would come to an end, because he's done so well. You have to remember, when he took over in 2014, Toronto had never made the playoffs. Right. After 7 years in Major League Soccer, they'd never made the postseason. And he turned the club around. And yes, look, he had a lot of help with the cash flow that was installed in Toronto FC, signing players like Giovinco, Bradley, Altidore, Jermaine Defoe for a little bit as well. Piatti now this season, Pozuelo. He's had a lot of help, but you still have to manufacture a culture. You still have to get everybody on the same page and play effective football. And I think Greg Vanney deserves all the credit that he is due. I thought he did a great job at Toronto. The interesting thing, so like you said in the press release, it says that he stepped down. I wonder, and myself and Kindra spoke about this on the other podcast as well, but I wonder if it got to the stage where he thought, I don't know if I can take this team any further? Or was it Ali Curtis and co who thought that instead and thought, right, maybe we need to move on? Because honestly, I thought, Steve, that this was going to be sort of like a Peter Vermees type thing, and he was going to be there for 10 plus years, It just seemed to fit, and everything was working around him. Yes, they had to slip up in 2019, but for the most part, everything around them was working so well. Not in 2019, sorry, in 2018. Mm-hmm. I thought everything was moving so fluidly around them, and I thought, yeah, this club is going to be under this coaching staff for a long time. Now, the question mark now is what happens next, because I said this on the other podcast, and I know we're live now, so I'll just go ahead and say it. I was told from somebody within somebody who's got good contacts, let's say that, that he has already had a conversation with LA Galaxy, who's Greg Vanny, which is not completely surprising. It seems to be the obvious move for him. He's a Californian kid as well. And I think the Galaxy are in need of stability probably more than ever before. And I think he could provide it, a long-term project as well. So I could see that happening. But the biggest question for me now is what do Toronto do? Because when Vanny took over, they were essentially at best a mid-table Eastern Conference team. Now it is a legitimate argument to say they are perhaps not a global brand, but certainly an international brand. People know who Toronto FC are because of the caliber of players they've signed over the last 5 or 6 years. Around the world, people know who Toronto are. That comes with expectation. That comes with the understanding that you're going to be towards the upper echelons of the Eastern Conference year after year. So one would assume that requires somewhat of a large name in terms of the head coach. So what do? Do they go abroad and go the route that so many teams that have got a bit of cash to splash in the past have, and go with a big foreign name, which doesn't always work? We've seen that in this league. Mm-hmm. Or do they do something outlandish and try and get somebody like a North American? Do they try and go for the best in North America and try and prize someone like a Peter Vermees away from Kansas City? Much like they tried to do with Adrian Heath when he was at Orlando several years ago. Sure. What do they try and do? Do they try and go for, essentially a comfort blanket in somebody like a Peter Vermees who can deliver given time? Or do they go the foreign route and go for someone that they know will potentially put bums on seats, might attract other star players? And the interesting thing about this now, Steve, is that there is so much pressure on Ali Curtis to get this right, because the GM for TFC, for those unaware. So if they don't get it right, if Ali Curtis doesn't get this right, you remember the Atlanta situation, all the fingers were pointed at De Boer, and quite rightly so. If it happens here at Toronto and they bring in a big name, I think the fingers will be pointing at Ali Curtis. So let's wait and see. But it's a fascinating story, Steve. I couldn't believe it when I woke up this morning and I got the text from Kindred St. Auburn, actually. I couldn't believe it. And I was immediately texting people trying to find out what's going on, what's happened, So it's look, because for me, Toronto are one of the biggest teams in Major League Soccer now. And I'm absolutely intrigued to see what they do over the course of the next few months.
Yeah, I would say, Cal, if Toronto's able to pry away Peter Vermees in the next day or two, that would be ideal for Minnesota United. But I think that you bring up an interesting point. I mean, immediately as you talk about bringing in an international head coach with, sort of a pedigree and everything like that, I thought of Atlanta United and their sort of plan. But the problem is that you can miss on those plans, as they did with Frank De Boer. It just didn't work out. I will say that I think that there's something to regardless of whether this was from, Greg Vanny's side or from Toronto's side or some kind of mutual understanding between the two of them, there is something to be said for cutting bait at a moment when there has still been recent success, but you have a sense that maybe that's not going to work in the future. Rather than, I think that a lot of times, and this is a thing we've talked about before in MLS and soccer in general, this question of if you're a selling league, and this is not necessarily related directly to that, but it's sort of more about the ethos of how MLS works. In the NBA, you're looking to find your guy who's going to be your guy for 10 seasons or something like that. In MLS, as a sort of a stepping stone league to other leagues, there's something worthwhile to consider about the idea that, like, hey, Greg Vanny took a team that was nowhere, turned it around. They've had success. This year they bowed out in the first round. Like, let's just move, right? Maybe it benefits Greg Vanney. He gets to go to a situation like LA Galaxy as an example. If you mentioned that, maybe that's a possibility for him. He gets to go to a good situation where he is not tarnished by having done a good job and then having to hang on through several years of things not working before moving on. He just moves on directly from that. Toronto also comes off of being successful and being elevated, having players like Javinko, like you said, these international people, Pozuelo, et cetera. They're attractive. They can attract a different level of head coach than they could have attracted when Greg Vanney became the head coach, So, I don't know if it works. I don't know if it always works, but there is something to that idea of not saying we're going to keep this going for a long time to see if we can recapture something. Instead, we're just going to move and then we'll just deal with the new situation. And I think there's something it's interesting. So
what is interesting, Stephen, what's quite exciting from just a generic Major League Soccer fan point of view is that if you think about some of the jobs that are available right now, massive markets, Toronto, LA Galaxy still at the moment as it stands, Atlanta and DC United, all humongous markets, very attractive to very attractive people.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on and talk a little bit about, I wanted to talk about the attack, Minnesota United's attack. And the question of the heading here I have is the orthodoxy of forwards. I feel like since Minnesota has been in MLS, there's been this discussion about what kind of forward is going to work for Minnesota United. What kind of forward do they need? They've sort of struggled to have consistent production at the forward position from, Christian Ramirez, obviously hometown hero for Minnesota United and Minnesota United fans, but not a perfect forward by any means. He had issues with his game. They wanted to get different things out of it. We had Angelo Rodriguez, who played sort of a hold-up role, who, again, we talked about, not necessarily a guy you look to score a lot, but a guy who's going to lay off to other players. Didn't work out so well for him. We had Abu Danladi and Mason Toye. They're young, they're speedsters, they get in behind, but never really clicked entirely while they were here. Kai Kamara, who we have now, who's great. He's tall. He's an aerial threat, but he's obviously getting older. He's probably not your solution for years to come or anything like that. And just in the last couple of games, Adrian Heath has hit on this solution of, as he said himself, just put your best 4 players who are attackers out there in the front of the attack and worry a little bit less about like what it means to be a forward or what is the quality of a forward, and just say, listen, all these guys can pass to different, they can all pass well. Finlay, we're talking about here about Ethan Finlay, Emmanuel Reynoso, Kevin Molino, and Robin Lod. They can all pass. They can all score goals. They can all run in behind. They interchange with each other, and it's working right now. It's really attractive football to be watching out there. So it's kind of fun. We're like, maybe you don't need a forward at this point.
Well, what I will say, Steve, it's possibly the most un-Adrian Heath thing I've ever seen.
Right?
He loves working with centre forwards. He's done it for a long, long time. In every job he's had, he's always had a preferred centre forward. He's always had somebody who he tries to work with. And this is just the complete opposite. And I don't know, it's maybe because he's got other forwards on the roster that he perhaps doesn't think need much work. Which, if you think about it, is probably true, because Aaron Schoenfeld and Kai Kamara are about as complete of a version as what they're probably going to be now as players. So, but it's still very un-Adrian Heath, because he always has a centre forward on the field, as most teams in a basic football match do. But what we've been exposed to is the versatility of Robin Lod, who we had a little glimpse of, didn't we, when he was playing on the right-hand side of the 3 behind the forward, and to great effect. But I think him playing as a centre forward now just does show how versatile he is, because he's played as a number 8 for Finland as well. He's played as a centre forward in the past as well. All credit has to go to Robin Lod at the moment, Steve. I think that the one thing I'm most impressed with, more than anything, with Lod, and we mentioned this in our media availability to Adrian Heath yesterday or the day before, whenever it was. I love the fact that Robin Lod, you mentioned it briefly, he's not necessarily going to do what a regular centre forward does. He may not necessarily make a near post run. He may not necessarily press as much as people expect this Minnesota team to, and and a centre forward on this team to do. But what he does very well is he causes confusion because he sits in these horrible little areas in between the centre halves and the full-backs and centre halves. And what I think he does really well, which I think has sort of gone not unnoticed, but hasn't been given the attention it deserves yet, is he's done a fabulous job at pulling people away, pulling centre halves out of position. There's a reason why Molino and Reynoso have just started to click over the course of the last couple of weeks. Yes, no doubt, the two of them together without Robin Lod are very, very good and would give MLS teams nightmares for days. And they combine together very well indeed. But Robin Lod plays his part in this, Steve, because, as I said, when he pulls away a centre-half, it must be a nightmare to play against him as a defender because you don't know what to do, because in the false nine role, you are essentially, you're supposed to drop deeper. And as a centre-half, what do you do in that situation? Because so many times now we see systems where it's all about man marking. We see the zonal marking from time to time, but if you've got a centre-forward, and imagine you're the defender and Robin Lod drops 10 yards, what do you do? Do you go with him? Because if he's dropping to receive the ball, all of a sudden he's an extra body in midfield. What do you do? Do you drop and then leave a gap behind you exposed, which Reynoso has taken advantage of, as has particularly Kevin Molino over the course of the last few games. And as I said, because of all the intricacies of a regular centre-forward that perhaps Robin Lod doesn't do, it's almost like a lot of these centre-halves are almost learning on the job, because going up against Robin Lod is something completely different. No doubt they will have gone up against false nines before, but these would have been false nines that are natural centre-forwards. Robin Lod isn't. And ultimately, that provides a real element of confusion for the opposition. But it provides a heck of an opportunity for Minnesota United. And I don't think anybody, if you'd have said this even a month ago, Robin Lod's playing as a centre forward, people would have laughed. There's no way. But it's worked. It really has worked. And I'm really interested to see what he does on Thursday.
Yeah, it's been fun, Cal, to watch him play. And I think he's been a player who, from the time he joined the team, you could see he had a fantastic brain, for football. Like he thinks the game well. He positions himself well. I think immediately it was apparent that his fitness wasn't there when he joined the team. He had, finished his season in Europe, and then he had a layoff and then come back. He had his first child was born during that first season. It was not an ideal situation for him, but you could always see that he knew what he should be doing. He knew, you rarely saw like just him not doing the right thing. It was just, a question of production. He had opportunities he couldn't finish, and now he's finishing those chances, first moving to the right and now moving into the sort of center forward role. It's fun. And I think it's challenging because, as you said, when he drops, the other thing is that when he drops, he's also a passing threat in a way that a lot of center forwards are not in that regard, that the center forward is looked at as sort of the tip of the spear, right? So the center forward is the last guy who's going to have the ball before they score a lot of the time. But with Robin Lod, you've got other guys around you who are dangerous scorers that he can pass to, and he's a tremendously dangerous passer. So you put those two things together, and as you said, I think the confusion it's causing is very interesting. I think that it brings in all kinds of opportunities, as you said, for Molino, for Reynoso, for Ethan Finlay, who again is one of those guys where, obviously in the last game against the Rapids, he didn't get on the score sheet, but it only just takes a minute, and then the next game he's going to have a brace or something like that. Like the game is going to break in certain ways, and he might have those opportunities. It depends on who his matchup is and everything like that. So it's just those four working together are doing great stuff. I am curious how much of it, the unorthodoxness of it, the surprise element, when you think about San Jose and how tough they were for other teams initially for a while and intermittently since then with man marking, and they've had their own issues with players breaking down or sort of keeping up that scheme full time, or do they need to do something else? But this is unorthodox. It's surprising. The one thing I'm worried about is, like, if I can count on any coach out there to figure out what to do against something unorthodox, it's probably Peter Vermees. That's sort of the problem I see.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you there, Steve. But we spoke to Kerry Zavagnin, the assistant manager of Sporting KC, on the other podcast earlier today, and he admitted that they will, unsurprisingly, draw a lot of attention to Emmanuel Reynoso, because now Minnesota are a transitional team through the center. Yes, they still go out wide from time to time, but I don't think they rely on the flying fullbacks as much as they have done anymore, because of the presence of Reynoso. Right. And a lot of it comes down to, Reynoso has so much of the ball a lot of the time. He drops deep, sometimes deeper than Adrian Heath would like, I know. But he wants the ball at the feet all the time. And the reason I bring this up is because Reynoso has had a lot of the ball, particularly in the attacking third, because Lurd will drop deeper. Robin Lurd will drop in this false nine position, meaning that someone's got to mark him. As I said earlier on, he becomes another man in midfield. Someone's got to mark him. And all of a sudden, he's pulling away a central midfielder, not just a centre half. And all of a sudden, Reynoso's got all this space. And Robin Lurd, for me, Steve, has been supremely underrated. And what a season he's had statistically as well, So 9 goals in all competitions this season. And I would not bet against him getting another before the season ends as well, So he's just caused, as you quite rightly say, a real element of confusion to the opposition. And I'm really intrigued to see what happens, because one would assume on Thursday it'd probably be Punchette and Reed at centre-half for Kansas City. I think Beasley's out with a head injury. And particularly Winston Reed's a vastly experienced centre-half. So I do wonder what their plan is to sort of counteract, because now, Steve, they will have seen tape. The last 2 games, they will have seen tape of Robin Lurd. So I wonder what they're going to do to try and counteract it. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, we'll circle back to Sporting Kansas City in a little bit. First of all, when injury takes you out of the game, it's time for your team to step up. At Allina Health Orthopedics, you'll get expert care backed by a whole health system of providers. With convenient locations, virtual options, and an app that gives you 24/7 access to your records, test results, and care team, you're always close to the care you need. Schedule now at allinahealth.org/ortho. Before we circle back to SKC, I did want to bring up sort of a terminology thing that I wanted to bring up and educate everybody. I don't know if it's an official term, but I wanted to discuss the gentleman's hat trick. Are you familiar with the gentleman's hat trick?
Is this when it's left foot, right foot, head?
No, no, good guess.
That's called a perfect hat trick elsewhere. So go on, sorry.
The gentleman's hat trick is 3 assists in a game. So it's more polite than a hat trick. Okay. The idea is the gentleman's hat trick. And I am not sure of the provenance of this. I know Jeff Ruder, writer for The Athletic, has used it before. I don't know if it originated with him. I think it starts at least a couple years ago. I can't remember if I heard it or how this came through, but I do know I was there at the beginning of the gentleman's sweep, which is a term which comes from the NBA. And it is, as far as I know, this is where the idea of the gentleman's hat trick also comes from. But it's from the NBA playoffs, which is it was a best of 5, right, or best of 7 game, right? So you need to win 4, and it's where you win 4-1. Usually losing like the game before the one you win. So you win 3 games, and then the other team, you let them have 1 win, and then you win the next game. So it's the gentleman's sweep. So instead of a sweep, it's it's like a little more polite. So the gentleman's hat trick is 3 assists. Emmanuel Reynoso had a gentleman's hat trick the last game. Lud, these include I'm including secondary assists for this, because I believe Lud had secondary assists to complete his. Lud had one the game before that. Jan Gregush has also scored a gentleman's hat trick. It's a great, fun term, and I encourage everyone to start using it.
Well, good luck with that. I'll use it in the pub or when I'm with you. There we go.
Okay. You're not going to promise to use it on the broadcast, though.
We'll see.
Think about it. Yeah, it's good. It's a good term. One of the funnest things about soccer is all the weird terms. I have found myself. I was like, every time I feel like I get these all mixed up, and then I have to go back and look at them. And it's like, I find myself watching a game and being like, okay, now goal line, end line, touch line, being like, okay, which ones are all of these different things? So that I always have to go in and look at all the terminology. Let's talk about SKC a little bit, the matchup coming up. The main thing I wanted to focus on, which this has come up with Adrian Heath a couple of times, is people have asked, what do you do going to play in a place where you haven't won, you haven't gotten a point or anything like that? And his response has been, well, we've been terrible. which is fair, basically based on how the team has actually played. They've really never played a good game in Kansas City. The last game, I went back to check some, mitigating circumstances. I would say here's the lineup from the last game at Sporting Kansas City from left to right, back to front. Raheem Edwards, Bakai Dabasi in his first game, Jose Aja, Boxy, and Marlon Hairston, and then Hassani, Dotson, James Musa, and Jan Gregush, and then Mason Toy and Ja'Cory Hayes up top. So probably three of those people will start like in this game that's coming up. So it's just like that lineup is just, you throw out whatever happened in terms of the way that game was played. Right now, Minnesota United has a more or less completely healthy team, aside from season-ending injuries to Tyler Miller and Luis Amarilla, et cetera, like that. This is, I feel like you're going to get the same, about as good a lineup as you could possibly hope for out of Minnesota United this season going to Kansas City right now.
Yeah, I think so, Steve. And we spoke to Adrian Heath about this for the media availability, didn't we? I think I'm comfortable saying this. I said it on air, so I guess I've got to stick with it now. And I am the firm believer, and this is nothing to do with Kansas City, really. It's everything to do with Minnesota United. I think the intimidation of away SKC is nowhere near as large as it has been in the future. And as I said, nothing to do with Kansas City, because they're still arguably pioneers in the way that they have done things over the last 10 years. The way they play, the signings they've made, the stadium, all of the above. And they're still a very effective team. They finished top of the Western Conference. They're still very, very good. So it's going to be difficult regardless. It means everything in terms of Minnesota, in the sense that lineup you just mentioned there, and the previous 11s that Minnesota would have had when they'd gone to Children's Mercy Park, now it's completely different. Now they have several players we've just spent the last 20 minutes or so talking about. They have an Emmanuel Reynoso, who Kansas City haven't really had a proper chance to go up against yet. Mm-hmm. They have Michael Boxall and Dibasi, who have formed a wonderful partnership together. Let's assume they have Gregush or Alonso or Dotson, a fully healthy complement of central midfielders together. And as we said earlier on, they have this the trickery of Robin Lod to deal with as well, the confusion that causes. I think this will be a much more difficult task for Kansas City than they probably realise. And as I said, that's why I think, because of the roster that Minnesota have put together, because of the reputation now, finishing fourth in the West 2 years in a row, there's not that fear factor anymore of going away to Kansas City, because I feel as though Minnesota can match up against them. I'm not suggesting they go down there and play Kansas City at their own game, because I think that's a recipe for disaster for most teams. But I don't think Minnesota will sit deep and look to counter either. I think they will continue to press and transition through the centre as they have done over the course of the last couple of months, since Reynoso's come in. And I don't think Kansas City have dealt with a Minnesota side like this before. So whilst I'm still firmly of the opinion, Steve, that this is one of the more difficult places to go in Major League Soccer, and in a regular season you take a tie every single day of the week, obviously that's not possible moving forward into this elimination game. I think both sides will be as gung-ho as possible. I think an early goal is absolutely crucial in this game. Mm-hmm. I think setting the standard and the tone will be massive. And for the first time ever, I can see Minnesota United doing that in the opening 10 minutes because of the players they have at their disposal. We've never, ever been able to say that before away at Kansas City.
Sure. Yeah. I think that it's also important that you not go to penalties against Tim Melia. I would have to say.
Yes.
Definitely not go to penalties. I think there's also a huge built-in advantage that Sporting Kansas City generally have at Children's Mercy Park at playing at home that they no longer have, which is everybody's going to point to the supporters. That's surely a case. But because teams are flying down the same day, they're not going to go out and eat barbecue the night before and be all logy and not able to play because they're full of ribs. So I think that not having the threat of barbecue from Kansas City hanging over the players' heads is a huge one. That's my big take on it.
That's a great point, Steve. Let's hope the Kansas City chaps go out and have a humongous slab of ribs the day before, and hopefully they're all lethargic and Minnesota can take advantage. We'll see. Hey, look, I don't blame them. I've just spent a couple of days down there for Thanksgiving. I had ribs almost every day. It's amazing. Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, it's terrific. It's terrific. All right, let's close. Let's talk a little bit about. I want to touch on Diego Maradona, a legend. I mean, and we throw around the word legend a lot, but man, if you're talking about legends of soccer, that is a true legend of soccer. I wanted to open up. I had read an appreciation of him by Brian Phillips at The Ringer, who's a fantastic soccer writer. The two things I really liked from him is he talked about how Maradona had an almost sort of Keith Richards-esque reputation of, his life was lived to the max, and it seemed like he could have died so many times based on his behavior and things he had done. But by this point, what Brian says is it had begun to seem as though death was simply confused by him, like a cat trying to catch a laser pointer or like a third-rate defender watching him dribble. He had survived so much. Surely he will survive his own death too. And then another beautiful line from him talking about seeing Maradona play. And he says, I don't know why anyone cares what a person can do with a ball. I only know that Maradona was able to do things with one that, when you saw them, made you feel like the universe was telling you a secret. And I think that's absolutely true. If you go back and watch Maradona, at the bottom he had of the post, he had pasted a video from Maradona warming up the World Cup in 1989, and it's just like a sideline shot of him just juggling. Like there's music playing, he's kind of like getting into it. He's just juggling the ball, and what the way he is attached to that ball is just unreal. Just an incredible player and an incredible loss for the soccer world.
I think for the sports world, Steve. Not just soccer. I think there's so many people that you can identify as being big in the soccer world, but there's only a handful you can identify as being big in the sports world and the landscape in general. When you think of people like Kobe Bryant and LeBron James, Tiger Woods, I think Maradona is absolutely in that realm. Sure. I think even the most casual soccer fan will have heard of the name of Diego Maradona. And yeah, it's a massive loss. It was obviously before my time. I never got to see him play live or anything, but I've seen the tapes, and I'm firmly of the opinion that he would have been a joy to watch in this current iteration of the game. And I'm firmly a believer that he would have had similar effects to that of Ronaldo and Messi and what have you. And he was just a joy to watch. He was beautifully chaotic as well. There always seemed to be something with Maradona. I remember the last World Cup, 2018 World Cup, where he was watching Argentina, and he was hanging out of his suite, his box, and screaming and what have you. And he looked a right state. It looked like he was having a great time, to be fair to him. But unfortunately for him, like wherever he was, headlines always seemed to follow him. There always seemed to be a mess of some sort. Let me put it this way. Simplicity never seemed to follow Diego Maradona. It was the complete opposite. And there's not many people around the world like that anymore, and whilst obviously no one condones the bad sides of him, which we're all privy to, we've all seen, the good side of Maradona is warm and welcoming. I know of a handful of people that met him and always said nice things about him. But either way, Steve, when you lose someone like that in world sport, it'll go down for a long time, And I know the Argentine government, they said that we're going to have 3 days of national mourning. There's not many people that can shut a whole country down because of their death, And he'll be missed for sure. He was entertaining, and he's going to be missed for sure. And the major thing now, Steve, that he, I'm sure, will always be proud of and look down on, is the fact that he inspired so many people. Lost count of the amount of articles I've read of people who said they watched him and have watched tapes of him and were inspired by him. There's a reason why the number 10 is so well thought of around the world, and it's because of him and the way he plays. So the way he played. So it's a tremendous loss. And the only thing I will say is though that he will live on through the countless amounts of stories that I'm sure people will tell for an eternity.
Yeah, it was really fun to see. Like, I think it was Messi was so had his Newell's old boys jersey under there, so he celebrated a goal by taking it off, and obviously a tribute to his countryman there. And I know it's a thing that's come up with people have talked to Reynoso about it, and sort of being from Argentina and all this stuff like that. And it's a tremendous legacy. I would recommend anybody go and check out. Also, Pablo Morer had a great article earlier this year on The Athletic. That was about when Maradona came to Canada. He played in one game for Toronto Italia in 1996. And that was a real nice read to get sort of a slice of Maradona also as a person, like you're saying, because again, he, as loud and brash and sort of troublesome and difficult as he could seem to be, person to person, it seemed like he was just a super generous soul, somebody who always wanted to get the best for the people he played with. And I agree with you totally, Cal, that there's an unfinished roughness to him, and looking back at his career, just what you read about him and what you see, that in this day and age, it seems like everybody's really aware of how they project on social media, like how they market their brand, how they sell their shoes, how they do all that stuff. And I understand, it's like, you got to be aware of that stuff. That's the age we live in. But, he had that feel of like, I'm just going to live and do everything I can. And I remember that moment from the World Cup in 2018 of his celebration. And it really encapsulated a lot about him, I think.
Yeah, it did. He'll be missed for sure. And like I said, it's a huge loss for the entire sports world, not just soccer. And as I said, there's only a handful of people you can really say that about. And he's certainly one of them.
Yeah. Well, rest in power, Diego Maradona. Thanks for joining us for the 122nd Sound of the Loons podcast presented by Allina Health Orthopedics. Minnesota United next heads south to face Sporting Kansas City in the Western Conference semifinals on Thursday, December 3rd at 7:30 p.m. That game will be broadcast again on Fox, just the big Fox. And you can listen on Score North. Be sure to leave us a nice review on iTunes or at the very least a 5-star rating, and follow the team on Twitter at MNUFC. And Cal at CalWilliamsCom, and me at Steve Venturous. Apologies, as always, to Richard Wagner. And remember, there's only one person in this whole world like you.